Thank you, Chair. I am certainly delighted to have the opportunity to address this meeting and to briefly set out a few of Ireland's perspectives on this subject. As many of you may know, Ireland has made a very strong commitment in our overseas development programme, and indeed in our whole foreign policy, to the global effort to prioritise the elimination of hunger. Some 20% of our total ODA is now going towards food security, to hunger alleviation, and in particular to smallholder agriculture and nutrition. A special priority in relation to nutrition has of late been to give a strong focus to encouraging the Scaling Up Nutrition Initiative, the SUN initiative, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. In that context, last September, the United States government and the Government of Ireland met together with leaders from the United Nations, from several governments and partners represented here, and committed ourselves to a program of 1,000 days. Again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. 1,000 days is a program of action to support the SUN, with the intention particularly to emphasize the particular and absolute necessity to address malnutrition among mothers and children under 2. I thought it might be useful, just simply as a kick-off to this afternoon, to share with you a few brief thoughts on the SUN effort, on the SUN movement, and how, from our perspective, this campaign is progressing. We had a follow-up meeting yesterday with a number of partners, a very useful, I think, a very productive meeting with a number of partners, and I know that some of the colleagues, my colleagues here on the panel, and indeed many of you attended that meeting. But I thought it useful just to bring to this plenary meeting some of the major points of discussion and the conclusions. My apologies in advance if I haven't captured them all. The meeting was all morning and some of the afternoon, so I'm not going to try and capture everything. But for me, the main points from that was, number one, a very broad agreement of the vital importance of ensuring that this movement, the SUN movement, be led by participating countries. In other words, that the priorities and the plans be country-specific and managed by the governments and leaders in the countries themselves. During the meeting, we were delighted to learn of the high and indeed growing level of political commitment in many of the countries, often led by either a head of state or head of government, which has resulted, I believe, in nutrition now being much more centrally placed in some of the governments, and which therefore we have the basis to enable a much stronger interdepartmental coordination, which is essential. I think we would all agree. There's now a strong recognition of the importance of having a fully multi-sectoral approach to nutrition. Very important, the nutrition is now being reflected much more strongly, I feel, in some of, not all, but in some of the national development plans and in poverty reduction strategies, with an emphasis on ensuring that all programs, not just specific nutrition ones, but all development programs have a nutrition focus. But as well as being multi-sectoral, there is an increasing emphasis on an engagement of multi-stakeholders. There was a discussion, therefore, on the importance of involving a very broad range of actors in the nutrition effort. Others have mentioned the role of the private sector. And personally, I feel this is something that is still not as vibrant or as adequately explored as it can and indeed must be. And perhaps Jay, on our panel, might like to expand on that. I didn't tell you this in advance, Jay, but thought you might. So also, the potential to engage a number of what you might call the non-traditional partners or elements, such as smallholder farmer organizations, trade unions, the media, consumer groups, and of course, very important, the whole civil society sector. Many of the participating countries spoke of the need for building a stronger capacity at all levels, for help in their advocacy efforts and in developing, as was mentioned just now, monitoring and evaluation frameworks. And finally, among the agreements at the meeting, and which I must say I very much welcome, was that several countries committed to begin to develop reference groups which will bring forward the whole process in their respective countries. Of course, there was a good discussion at the end of the meeting on the need for resources and where such resources might come from. Let me just make a couple of points on that. I believe there is a strong commitment and support from several of our donor partner governments, and also, and again perhaps untapped or insufficiently tapped, from the multilateral sector, who are also engaged and can be more so. I believe there's a need for many of the participating governments to continue and even strengthen their own commitments to this process, including the allocation of resources. But I strongly believe that if plans are developed, that if structures for coordination are put in place, and if impact of some of these initiatives begin to be felt, I believe that the resources will inevitably flow. And I can only reaffirm Ireland's commitment to and support for this process. But I believe it's not necessarily about increasing resources. I believe one of the messages from yesterday is that it's more about being more strategic in making better use of existing resources. The kind of things which links to the subject of the whole conference, that is leveraging agriculture, and I might add leveraging education to achieve better nutritional outcomes. And I think with the overwhelming evidence that investment in nutrition is the single most cost-effective development investment. I refer here not to anything that I did, but to what most of you are familiar with, the Copenhagen Consensus, which was a group of eminent economists, not health workers or nutrition specialists, but economists, who concluded, as I said, that investment in nutrition is the single greatest resource and investment that we can make in terms of its return. With that in mind, I would like to encourage participating governments to proceed with confidence and urgency to follow the paths which they're already working on. And of course, I would appeal to all donors and development partners to continue to back up the commitments to prioritize nutrition in their ODA and to give the support, whether bilaterally or otherwise, that this effort so obviously and urgently warrants. In conclusion, let me just say that in Ireland, we are and remain passionate on the whole subject of hunger. I suppose inevitably, in the light of our own history of hunger, its causes and its consequences. So my thanks for the opportunity to share some of these reflections, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.